And today we are going to talk about Rabbi Benjamin Lau and his book that is called The Sages. I'm just trying to move your faces from the middle of the screen. But okay, great. Okay, I think we managed. Great. So I titled the class in Conversations with the Sages, Ancient Wisdom for a Modern Mind. The question that I have is, did anyone read the series of these books, The Sages? Anybody? Okay, so I hope that after today, you will want to read these amazing books. It's a series of 5 books that are talking about the sages, but let's first talk about Rabbi Lau. Rabbi Benjamin Lau, Benny Lau, is a well-known figure in Israel. He's also a product of a very serious rabbinic family. Rabbi Benny Lau is a son of Naphtali Lau Lavi. And Naphtali Lau Lavi was a man who saved his younger brother in the camps, and his younger brother became the former chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Israel Meir Lau. If anybody ever heard about a book or read a book Out of Depth, then you will know who I'm talking about. He is also Rabbi Benjamin Lau. He is also a grandson of the Piotrkov Tribunalski chief rabbi, who unfortunately was murdered in Treblinka. On his mother's side, his brother, by the way, his brother Amichai Lau Lavi, he lives in New York, and he founded an organization which is called Storytelling, and it's like a ritual theater company. And he also founded a non-denominational Jewish congregation. On his mother's side, his mother was born, Rabbi Benjamin's mother was born in England, to also a prominent rabbinic family, which were the students of the school of thought of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. So I would say it's a rather heavy, big shoes to fit in. And I believe Rabbi Benjamin Lau really found his own place in these shoes. He was born in Tel Aviv. He grew up at Ramat Gan, and he was a student of Segula School in Bnei Brak. So he has a lot of exposure to different kinds of Jewish thoughts. He participated in the Bnei Akiva movement. After that, he went on to learn in Yeshivat Har Zion. And after the yeshiva, after studying in yeshiva for some time, he actually drafted into IDF, into the Galani Brigade. This is one of the brigades that I think most known outside of Israel. He's living in Jerusalem now, and he used to serve as a rabbi of Kehilat Ramban synagogue in Jerusalem for 18 years. I have to say that I found that when he concluded his tenure at the synagogue in 2019, there were about 400 people who joined Seudat Shlishit in honor of his leaving from the synagogue. He is one of the founders and the head of the program that is called 929 Tanakh Beyachad, which tries to read Tanakh every chapter of Tanakh pretty much every day except Friday and Saturday. He also teaches at Beit Morasha in Jerusalem. He serves there as the head of Beit Midrash program together with Rabbi Dr. Yehuda Brandeis. And he established the Beit Midrash for women in 2000. He is also a PhD and master's and a PhD in Talmud from Bar-Ilan University. And even though he's Ashkenaz, his doctoral dissertation actually dealt with halakhic theories of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef of blessed memory. So he is a very rounded, super educated, different sides of education and exposed to different sides of Jewish ritual and Jewish tradition. And he wrote these amazing 5 books about our sages. Before we talk about the actual sage, or 2 sages, I should say, that I picked, I would like to bring us back to the timeline and see where we are in the times of Jewish history. So first of all, we have, and this is the timeline that actually Rabbi Lau has in his book, in everyone. So first we have the men of the great assembly, right? The temple is standing here, right? And in the world, we have Cyrus. From Cyrus to Alexander, this is the time where the line kind of starts. Then we go to the pairs, right? Zugot, the pairs, which roughly coincide, their timing roughly coincide with the times of Hashmonaim. The last of the Zugot are Shammai, Hillel, and their students, and they live in the times of mostly Herod and his a couple of people before and after. Then we have Rabban Gamliel, the elder, who lives basically on the verge of the common era. And then we have already the governors, because there's no independent Judea at this moment. And then we are unfortunately hitting the time of destruction and the war with Rome. And after that, this is what's happening in terms of our sages who assert themselves as the leaders of the Jewish people, and they are basically working at preservation of Jewish knowledge. And therefore, we are seeing people who are arguing in the Talmud as we know it, because they live right after the destruction, and their story is the one of preserving the Jewish knowledge, the Jewish history, and the Jewish people, frankly. This is in all of the books. This timeline covers all of Rabbi Blau's books. But now let's come a little bit closer to the people that I'm going to talk about. We remember the miracle of Hanukkah, right? And the Hashmonean dynasty comes on the stage of our history with the Hashmonean dynasty, with the miracle of Hanukkah, with the Hanukkah wars. And after Hanukkah, we have the Hashmonean dynasty. The person who Rabbi Lau, of course, talks about also in his book is High Priest Yochanan, or John Hyrcanus. It's the same name. Notice that the Hashmonean dynasty, the Hashmoneans, the Maccabees rather, before they were Hashmoneans, they fought against the Greeks, and now we see that these names are Greek. Each one of them, of course, has a Jewish, like not each one, but most of them have also Jewish names. But the history preserved them with the Hellenistic names. After John Hyrcanus, or Yochanan, High Priest Yochanan, dies, the throne, he's the one who has both the priesthood and the throne together. And he leaves his throne to his son, Aristobulus. Aristobulus, notice, reigns very, very little, only for 1 year. And why? When we live today, it's amazing when we look back to the Jewish history, it's amazing how we don't learn, how much we don't learn. Jewish history, unfortunately, is replete with Hinatzinam. And Aristobulus was a person who was very, very suspicious, so suspicious, in fact, that he murders his own mother and one of his brothers and puts everybody else in prison. But, excuse me, this suspicious character looks like not playing very good for him. So he dies after being on the throne for just 1 year. He dies, and his wife, Salome Alexandra, or a woman whose name is preserved in the Jewish history as Shlom Tzion Hamalka, she releases his relatives from prison, and she marries his brother, and she is 14 years older than this brother, Alexander Yanai, right? We know that Alexander became Jewish name already, and at that time, and her name was Salome Alexandra, and her husband's name was Alexander Yanai. After Salome dies, and we will go through that, after Alexander dies, he bequests his throne to his wife and not to his sons, 2 of them. But after Salome dies, she is the last and basically the only ruling Jewish queen, ruling an independent Jewish kingdom. 2 of her sons, also Hyrcanus, now the second, and Antigonus, 2 of her sons start fighting for the throne. She technically leaves the throne to Hyrcanus because he was older, but he was milder kind of a person, and Antigonus was more like his father. So they start fighting, and unfortunately for all the Jews, not only for their family, at some point, each one of them invites Rome to help his side. And as we, looking back to our history, can ascertain, once you call for the big brother never leaves. So Rome takes possession, Rome never leaves. Herod overthrows the Hashmoneans in 37 BCE. And as we all know, in 70 CE comes destruction. This is the historical background of the people that I want to talk about. And these people are Salome Alexandra, or Queen Shlom Tzion. And Rabbi Blau talks about her, of course, in his book. However, he talks more about a person that some consider her brother. Most of the poskim consider Shimon ben Shetach, Shlom Tzion's brother. But there are those who say that, no, it's not necessarily the truth. Now, why Rabbi Blau's books, I think, are so interesting. I am a product of kind of Art Scroll book education. So in Art Scroll, you will see statements that are sort of very certain. Shimon ben Shetach was her brother. He is the one to institute this and this, and so on. Rabbi Blau takes different sources, and he also juxtaposes Jerusalem Talmud and Babylonian Talmud. And therefore, I just want to give a little bit of the line of the difference, I guess, between Jerusalem Talmud and Babylonian Talmud. Both of them were basically made in order to preserve Jewish tradition, Jewish knowledge, Jewish ritual. However, the Babylonian and Jerusalem Talmuds are slightly different. First of all, Jerusalem Talmud is the earlier one of the two Talmuds, which means to me, I think that the knowledge of the facts on the ground are always more preserved by something that is closer to the event, right? We know, for example, we can make even an example today, people who still remember the Holocaust, or people whose parents are survivors, they remember very well. And for next generation, their memory is already a little bit distorted. So I believe that we can safely say that Jerusalem Talmud could have preserved more straighter facts on the ground, perhaps with less redaction. Jerusalem Talmud was compiled in the Galil, not in Jerusalem, and in the academies of Tiberias, Sepphoris, Caesarea, around, it was sort of finished around the 4th century. Babylonian Talmud, by contrast, and also Jerusalem Talmud, we would probably want to say, was compiled under greater tragedy, greater hardships, because Jews in Judea at that time, already now not Judea, because this was already renamed province of Rome, they are living in very harsh conditions. Babylonian Talmud, by contrast, was compiled in the academies of Babylon, Sura, Pumbedita, Nahardea, Mahoza, and over several centuries. So the foundation of that Talmud was done in the 3rd century, and we also know that the main compilation took place between 4th and 5th centuries, and it was kind of finished with Rav Ashi and Ravina. So we actually know the exact people who finished the compilation, and the final redaction happened in 6th century by the people that we do not know. They have like a specific name, but we don't know their actual names of each one of them. So slightly different pictures we are seeing in Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds, and that will become important when we look at the piece of text. I brought you here also the text of Josephus. Now, about Shlom Tzion HaMalka. The reason I'm bringing Josephus is because Josephus is actually known not to be very kind to women who are rulers. And the fact that he is, kind of making her look good in our eyes, saying that she's preserving ancient customs of her country, and kind of shows that she was indeed a very important ruler. During the reign of Alexander, we have very different ways for Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmud to look at Alexander Yanai. Alexander Yanai historically is considered one of the greatest kings of Judea. And during his reign, which was over 25 years, if I remember correctly, he enlarged the kingdom of Judea even more than it was in Solomon's times. Unfortunately, he did it only by wars. He had kind of a foul temper, and he was very much not loving with the sages. At least this is what the Babylonian Talmud says. During the reign of Alexander, there was a bitter rivalry between two sects of the Jewish sages, you could say. They were Sadducees and they were Pharisees. all of us are kind of descendants of Pharisees, so they won the battle. But at that time, it was not a given. And Alexander prosecuted the sages quite a bit, according to Babylonian Talmud. But one thing that he has done, which was important, at his death, he actually gave very specific instructions to his wife, Shlom Tzion, in order for her to reign and not give the rules of the reigns to their sons yet, as well as to be kinder to Pharisees and to kind of reinstate them, to listen to them and reinstate them to ruling power. During the reign of Yanai, we are looking at the third pair of Zugot, which is Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shittach. And they faced quite severe challenges from both the Sadducees and the king himself. So this is a story from the Babylonian Talmud. And I would love for us to read this story first. Rabbi Blau brings this story in his book, and let us compare it to the story from Jerusalem Talmud and look at the differences and maybe see what questions we have for these pieces of rabbinic literature. Would anyone like to read? This one will go for another slide. Would anyone would like to read Hebrew or English, whatever you want? Anybody? Okay. Okay. So I guess it's me. I wanted us to be a little bit more interactive, but I can read it. Let's do it in English just for the sake of time. The Gemara relates, King Yanai and Queen ate bread together. And since Yanai executed the sages, there was no one to recite the grace after meals, blessing on their behalf. He said to his wife, who will provide us with a man to recite the blessing on our behalf? She said to him, swear to me that if I bring you such a man, you will not harass him. He swore, and she brought her brother, Shimon ben Shittach. She set him between the king's throne and hers. The king said to him, do you see how much honor I'm according you? He responded, it is not you who honors me, rather the Torah honors me. As it's written, extol her and she will exalt her and she will exalt you. She will bring you to honor when you embrace her. Yanai said to his wife, you see that he does not accept authority. They gave Shimon ben Shittach a cup of wine over which to recite grace after meals. He said, how shall I recite the blessing? Shall I say, blessed is he from whom Yanai and his companions have eaten? I have not eaten anything. He drank that cup of wine. They gave him another cup, and he recited the grace after meals blessing. By drinking the first cup, he joined the other diners and was therefore eligible to recite grace after meals. So this is a story from Talmud Bavli in Brachot. Notice that the words that are bolded in English are the actual words of the Gemara, and the words that are not bolded are kind of fed in for us by Rabbi Steinsaltz's explanation on the Talmud. So here, do we see any preliminary idea? Do we understand why he executed the sages? Why there's no one to recite a grace after meals? What kind of, feelings do we have about this story?
They were looking for a man to recite it. That's number one. That's part of it.
No, of course. I'm not,
Right.
yeah, we can't even question this
Right.
at that time. Yes, of course. But there's nobody to recite a blessing at the king's table? Isn't it very strange? Why is this happening? If there's nobody, it means that there are no learned men to recite the blessing. So the story goes, and Rabbi Blau brings the story, of course, in his book. The story before that, also which is in Yerushalmi, goes the following way. And then 1 second, we will see the yeah. Yeah. This is the story from Yerushalmi. Before we see the story from Yerushalmi, there is a story that is not present in Talmud Bavli. Remember, Talmud Bavli somehow pictures Yanai as really a despot, number one, as illegitimate king because, or illegitimate priest, because he has also both crowns sort of on his head, and as a person who hates the sages. Now, in the Yerushalmi, the story goes that there were 300 poor Nazarenes. Nazarenes, the vows of Nazir were apparently very common during those times. And in order to finish the Nazarite time, the person who doesn't shave and doesn't drink wine and so on and so forth, they had to bring a korban. And not everybody, a sacrifice, and not everybody was able financially to bring a korban. So there were 300 of these people who came to Rabbi Shimon ben Shetach and asked him for help. How can we finish our vow of Nazareth if we don't have money to buy korbanot? Shimon ben Shetach, being a very learned rabbi, was able to find rabbinic loopholes in the law. There are always loopholes in the law that you can find for specific people. And he was able to release 150 of these people from their vows without needing a korban. But 150 people he couldn't release. He went to King Yanai, which Rabbi Blau points out, if he went to King Yanai with such a request, it means they did have actually very cordial relationship. He went to the king and he said, I have 300 Nazarenes. Let us both release them. Can you pay for half of their korbanot? And I will release the other ones. So he was kind of in a clever way, he made the king agree to pay for 150 korbanot, but he himself didn't pay because of his knowledge. He was able to release these people. Now, when this happened, there were Sadducees that told the king that, look, he cheated you. You paid for 150 people and he didn't pay. Of course, they didn't say that he knew how to release them. And Shimon ben Shetach had to go into hiding. And now our story in Yerushalmi begins. Because it says, after some time, important people from the Persian Empire came to King Yanai. Now, we have to say that we are in the time when the Persians have an upper hand. Persians now defeated the Parthian dynasty, and they are basically the main presence of the Middle East. So they kind of enabled Yohanan, the high priest, to transform the Hashmonean dynasty before Yanai into an empire. So these are very important people. And they come to the king, and at the meal, they said to him, we remember that there was an old man who gave us a rabbinic discourse. He told them what had happened, meaning that all the surviving sages basically went into hiding. And they said to him, send and bring him. He sent and gave him his word. He came and sat between king and queen. He said to him, why did you trick me? He said, I did not trick you, you with your money, and I with my learning. As it's written, in the shadow of wisdom is the shadow of money. meaning that the money, the wisdom is more important. He said to him, why did you disappear then? He said, I heard that my Lord was angry with me, and I wanted to fulfill the verse from Mishayahu, hide a little bit until the rage passes. He used about himself, knowledge is an advantage. Wisdom lets the possessor live. He said to him, why did you sit between king and queen? He said to him, it is written in the book of Ben Sira, esteem it, and it will raise you and set you between princes. He said, bringing him a cup that he may recite grace. He took the cup and said, let us give praise for the food that Yanai and his company ate. He said to him, are you still obstinate as ever? He said to him, what should I say? For the food that we did not eat? He said, bring him something that he may eat. They brought, he ate, and he recited for the food that we ate. Slightly different version of the story, right? You don't feel that Shimon ben Shetach can speak with such authority at the person who has uncontrollable anger, as Talmud Bavli claims. Any questions, any notes, any comments here before I go forward? Okay. So it feels to me that the truth, as usual, is somewhere in between. Shimon ben Shetach was trying to change the whole Sanhedrin, which in times of the king Yanai was under the Sadducee rules. There is an interesting story also that Rabbi Blau brings after the death of King Yanai. But let's take a look at a very long piece from Josephus. I'm not going to read it fully. Hold on, before that, actually, 1 second. We'll go back to this slide in a second. Yeah, I'm not going to read it fully, but here, take a look. Josephus is bringing the full story about the inheritance, you could say, of the throne by Shlom Tzion HaMalka. And I know I'm talking more about Shlom Tzion than Rabbi Blau wrote here, because I just personally love her character. But what Josephus is saying, that Yanai didn't die in his palace. Yanai died at war. And in order for Alexandra to sort of become a reigning queen, she visited him at the battlefield, and this is when he fell ill and he died. And he instructed her, as we see here, in a very big detail, very, very detailed way, of how to bring his body back to Yerushalayim and how to give it to Pharisees for burying. And even he's saying that they may dishonor his dead body by refusing the burial as having severely suffered by my means, or whether in their anger they will offer any other injury to that body. Promise them also that thou wilt do nothing without them in the affairs of the kingdom. Meaning, he kind of changed his mind at the end of his life, and he decided to give not only reins to Alexandra, knowing that she had a brother, and Josephus also claims that Shimon ben Shetach was her brother, but he decided to instruct her, probably knowing that she would do it anyway, to give ruling power to Pharisees and not to Sadducees. So Alexandra then took the fortress that her husband was assaulting. It says that actually she rode on a horse and she participated in the battle. And she put all things in her power, both as to his dead body and to the affairs of the kingdom. And now she made Hyrcanus, her oldest son, the high priest, but she ruled during this time herself for 11 years. And that rule of hers is considered the most glorious time after King Shlomo. We see that Josephus is talking about her diplomacy, her outwitting the Armenian king Tigranus, who was trying, Tigran, we used to say, who was trying to assault a kingdom ruled by a woman, a small kingdom, so he was much more powerful, but Alexander was able somehow to prevent that assault. So now we have, 1 second. Oops, sorry. Now we have two pieces here about Shimon ben Shetach that I think are also very interesting to kind of compare and also to think about historical connections. If we look at the first one, Shimon ben Shetach decreed three things: that a person should use his wife's ketubah in his business dealings, that the children have to go to school, and that he decreed impurity for glassware. I am less interested in glassware impurity because, first of all, we already saw this, and Rabbi Blau pointed out that the impurity for glassware was declared by Yosef ben Yozer and Yosef ben Yochanan, a pair that preceded Shimon ben Shetach. But the second piece is very important. The children have to go to school. We have later on another piece in the Talmud that claims that Yeshua ben Gamla was the one who instituted the people, the students go to school. However, it was Shimon ben Shetach that started it the first. The children used to be taught by their fathers, but as time passed, not every father was able to teach his son. Also, not every father had time to teach his son because a lot of people were farmers and they needed to work in the fields. So the education of the children, we're talking about again, Judy, about boys only, the education was kind of not the priority. And there was a decline in knowledge. So what Shimon ben Shetach did in terms of children's education, this is Shimon ben Shetach instituted the system at which every boy, when they were 16 years old, they would go to Jerusalem to learn. And what Yeshua ben Gamla did later on was that they realized that 16 years old is already a kind of a grown-up young man. And not everybody, if they didn't learn before, not everybody has the capacity or even the desire to learn at that age. And therefore, the school system, which already existed, now was reconsidered and sort of reframed. And children started to learn in not in every village, but in every sort of center, like all of Brooklyn and all of Riverdale, there would be one place where the young students from 6, I believe, or 8 went to learn first until at 16 some of them who were learned enough and worthy enough and wanted it badly, they would go to Jerusalem to learn further. Why am I thinking that this is important in connection with Shlom Tzion HaMalka? Because Shlom Tzion is a queen at that point, And even though she's listening to her brother Shimon ben Shetach, or maybe not brother, maybe a relative, she she sure Bernie, she would have to give the final okay for such a tremendous undertaking as instituting schools for all 16-year-old boys. This is a tremendous koach, right, strength of this queen, who realized that even though some of the fathers may be reluctant to send their children, or some of the fathers would need their children to help, or some of the mothers, still the boys needed to go to school. If we think about what we call civilized world, let's talk about Europe in, I don't know, 15th century, 16th century, we know that the majority of population, certainly in Russia, even until 19th century, the majority of population is illiterate. And we are talking about Jewish boys going to school she died in 67 BCE. So let's say the last century before the Common Era, which is, of course, we all know, but still, I think it really pays to repeat and repeat and repeat this so that people know. Additionally, he instituted the use of the ketubah for the husbands, which basically allowed the family to have better financial conditions, because the ketubah being still a wife's possession, but while the husband is alive and they're married, they could kind of trade with the ketubah money. He also used to say, be thorough in the interrogation of witnesses, and be careful with your words, lest from them they learn to lie. This is a rather tragic story that we see in the Talmud. And I believe Shimon ben Shetach probably said it at the end of his life, when the story already happened. He was known to be really a rigorous and very strict personality. And when he was interrogating the witnesses, he was very harsh, and people died because he administered the capital punishment at some point, and there were people who died. And those the story goes that some of the relatives of those that were executed by the court at his judgment, they kind of conspired and wrongly accused his son of a wrongdoing, which was punishable by death. And Shimon ben Shetach, as a father, found himself in a very hard position, where he could not release his son, even though he kind of tried at first, and his son is recorded to be saying, don't do this, because then all of your verdicts will be considered wrong. And even though the son of Shimon ben Shetach was accused wrongly, the Talmud actually doesn't give you the final line whether he was executed or not, but at least we know that Shimon ben Shetach could not get him sort of out of that huge issue. So he was a very hard man, but I guess you can say that a man who is holding, or who thinks that he's holding the future of the Jewish nation on his and certainly of the Jewish tradition on his shoulders, he cannot allow himself to be very very soft a man. So Another little story, this is about the Yeshua ben Gamla. I'm bringing you here specifically to show that, oh, here we have age of 6, right? So he reformed, we could say, the school system so that the children started to learn from an earlier age. Now, when the Queen Shlomzion, with the help of her brother, Shimon ben Shetach, ruled the country for 11 years. As I said, this was the time when peace prevailed in the country, and blessings prevailed in the country. The way that Shimon ben Shetach organized the Sanhedrin was very interesting, because he did not want to remove all the Sadducees by force. He wanted to show that their learning was not enough. So the story in the Talmud talks about him posing, because he was the head of the Sanhedrin, he was posing questions to individual Sadducee judges on Sanhedrin, and the questions were so hard that not a judge was able to answer them. So the judge would ask for a day or two to find an answer. He would go home, he would look for answers, but he wouldn't be able to find an answer. And next day he would not show up to the Sanhedrin, giving Shimon ben Shetach possibility to change that judge to a judge who was knowledgeable from the Pharisees. And therefore he was able to change all 120 judges to the judges who were Pharisees or connected to Pharisees. And therefore we kind of come to the Sanhedrin that was able to function later on. If we look through other Zugot, and then Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, and their people after them, then these people are the ones who we know as sages, who were writing the Talmud that we study every day. And the last piece I wanted to show you is the piece from Sifra. This is also Tanaitic literature, which means it's the same time as the time of the Mishnah. And the Sifra, and I apologize, it's a different place where I was taking the text, so these brackets actually are not exactly in the right place. I'm sorry. The brackets should be around Yirmiyahu, you see, but sorry, just I tried all I could, but I couldn't do this. So it says that the blessing of God brings wealth. And it also says that then I will give you rains in their season, which would be on the nights of the Shabbat. Meaning that when there's rain on Shabbat, people don't go to work anyway. So the ground would be wet, the crops would grow, but it will not disturb people's work. So it happens in the days of Shimon ben Shetach, in the days of Queen Shlamtzion. There are many names: Shlamtza, Shalom Tzion, Shlom Tzion, for her, that the rains descended from the nights of Shabbat to the nights of Shabbat, until the wheat became like kidneys, and the barley like olive stones, and the lentils like golden dinars. And the sages tied up some of them and left them for future generation, to apprise them, by contrast to what were the fruits of sin. As it is written in Jeremiah, your transgressions has diverted these blessings, and in Ishayahu, and your sins have hidden his face from you against hearing, and your sins have withheld the good from you. Meaning that during these times, because the nation was peaceful, there were no wars, and the government was kind of looking toward the welfare of the people, as any government should do, the people really prospered. Queen Shlom Tzion was very, very beloved. And Shimon ben Shetach, we see his name all over the Talmud. And we can really assert that the stories of our ancestors, and especially the stories of our sages, are Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim, right? The stories of the deeds of our fathers are a sign for us. And I hope that after listening a little bit about the sages and the way Rabbi Blau presented them, you will be inclined to get these books and read them and return to them again and again. I have mine literally, I don't know if you see, with all kinds of, little takim to have notes for myself about them. And I come to these books again and again. And I feel that the lives of the sages really show a lot to us. There are many books written about the sages by different people, from rabbis to scholars. And like Rabbi Lau, we can say he is both a rabbi and a scholar. It's very interesting to trace their characters, compared especially to the time when they lived. Because once we cannot talk about any person outside of the time when they lived, outside of what's happening. And it's very interesting to trace the deeds of our sages based on when and where they found themselves. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have, or any comments, anything that you might want to voice.
Yashar Koche, this was very, very enriching.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm gonna stop the recording.